You got a headache? There's a pill for it. You want to feel up? Go to the neighborhood doctor. A cold, Monday morning blues, pills to make you focus more, and even pills for your kids to control their behavior. Pharmaceuticals are controlling people's lives and making a killing in profits. Hi, I'm Kavita Arwai, and this is Economic Divide's look at Big Pharma, the legal killers with a healthy, addictive promise. Big Pharma, profits at the expense of people's lives.
One of our largest holdings is Gilead Securities, and what we like about the company is that it is like a pharma company, but with higher growth.
Not interested in cures, but maintenance.
The pharmaceutical industry is not in the business of health and healing. That's not why they are manufacturing drugs.
The original pill was created sometime back in 140 BC for sore eyes. Today, just for the very same sore eyes, you could probably take a variety of medication if there are no side effects. But throughout time, pharmaceuticals have grown so much in size and power and profits that it is hard to distinguish whether they are in it to cure us or to have us keep going back, the relief temporary and short-lived. An industry that generates high profit margins. At the same time, no stranger to billion-dollar fines, widespread accusations of collusion and overcharging. No, we're not talking about banks. Welcome to the pharmaceutical industries. An industry that should develop medicines to save lives, but it profits for its own sake. Pharmaceutical companies have developed the vast majority of medicines, and they have profited handsomely from doing so, but not always by legitimate means. As evident from this table, pharmaceuticals ranks the highest profit margins of the 5 main industrial sectors, at times raking in a 42% profit margin. Case in point, U.S. giant Pfizer, the world's largest drug company by pharmaceutical revenue, made a 42% profit margin in 2013. In 2013, 5 pharmaceutical companies made a profit margin of 20% or more: Pfizer, Hoffmann La Roche, AbbVie, GlaxoSmithKline, and Eli Lilly. Pharma profits are huge. Some drugs cost $100,000 for a cycle, while the cost of manufacturing is just a tiny fraction of that. If you are making $3 billion a year on cancer drug Gleevec, could you get by with $2 billion? When do you cross the line from essential profits to profiteering? That's what Dr. Brian Drucker, director of the Knight Cancer Institute, has said. And it's not just cancer drugs. In 2013, drug company Gilead raked in sales of $3.5 billion for its hepatitis C drug Sovaldi.
One of our largest holdings is Gilead Securities, which is one of the large biotech companies specializing in HIV. But right now, they also have another leg of their stool, which is Hep C. And what we like about the company is that it is like a pharma company, but with higher growth. You get to participate on the upside with the underlying equity and get paid for the story to turn.
Drug companies justify the high prices they charge by saying that the research and development, or R&D, costs are high. On average, only 3 in 10 drugs launched are profitable, but when a drug becomes successful, it can generate revenues of $1 billion in 1 year. The the line becomes blurred with so much profit involved. Just because you can charge a high price for something does not necessarily mean that you should, especially when it comes to health, especially when it comes to saving lives. Unless curing and healing is not what pharmaceutical companies are after. This very topic, whether Big Pharma is after healing and curing, is what has become the inspiration and motive for Gwen Olson, a whistleblower turned activist who has said maintaining sickness is the real goal of pharmaceutical companies.
I spent 15 years in the pharmaceutical industry. As I started observing what was happening, what some of the drugs were doing, the misinformation, the disinformation, that I was being encouraged to minimize side effects when I talked to doctors, I started to recognize that these patients were literally being tortured by the drugs that they were given.
Pharmaceutical industry is not in the business of health and healing. That's not why they are manufacturing drugs. They're in the business of symptoms, maintenance, and disease management. That's what makes them money. That's what's profitable. Curing disease is not profitable. So there are a number of cures for various diseases that have been discovered, and then they're bought out by the pharmaceutical industry, or the companies are sued to keep these remedies off of the market because they interfere with drug profits.
There's no such thing as a safe drug. By the time a drug's approved and it hits the general population, we don't know even 50% of the side effects that are involved with that drug. We were being trained to misinform people.
I could not begin to tell you where these feelings of low self-esteem emanated from. There were no instances that I could recall. There were no events that it was just this thing, and the more I shared it, the more I realized how prevalent it is in our society, that people are fighting these demons constantly, left and right. I mean, ask Big Pharma. It's like everybody's on something.
That's like a nightmare coming true for people who are sick, that pharmaceutical companies are out to maintain sickness so that they can reap big profits, so they can continuously make profits by not actually healing people, but maintaining their sickness. But that is just one aspect of what these big pharma companies are doing.
One of the things that we examine in our film, both American Addict and American Addict 2, The Big Lie, is this culture of addiction.
The movie that Sasha Knezov is referring to is American Addict and its sequel. Their website says that it unveils how America has gone from the land of the free to the land of the addicted, that it represents 5% of the world's population, but consumes 50% of the world's prescription pills and over 80% of the world's prescription narcotics. This is not a coincidence.
I'm an American addict.
Right now, pharmaceutical companies are in control.
And it's the lawyer's fault, okay? It's the lawyer's fault. We invented corporations. We didn't give it a conscience. We didn't give it a soul. You can't put it in jail.
This is a criminal act on the part of a company.
Their marketing is ingenious. It is so illegal, it makes the Colombian cartel look like child's play.
I'm an American addict.
Relationships between the FDA, Big Pharma, physicians, and the media are in place to ensure that medical problems are treated primarily with pills. The horrific consequences that results from this practice results in overuse, abuse, and unnecessary deaths. Dr. Gregory Smith has dedicated his life to Americans' addictions to pills and the role of Big Pharma.
We have a perfect storm in the United States at this time for patients to take pills every single time they go to a doctor.
Hi,
I'm Dr. Gregory Smith.
Dr. Gregory Smith is a pain management and addiction medicine specialist.
Dr. Gregory Smith.
Dr. Gregory Smith.
Dr. Gregory Smith.
Dr. Gregory A. Smith.
Dr. Gregory Smith.
When I first started talking about prescription drug use and abuse 10 or 11 years ago, I used to say this was a growing epidemic. About 4 to 5 people die every single hour, every hour of the day, every day of the week, every week in the month, and every month in the year.
He's also the executive producer of American Addict and American Addict 2.
The ultimate goal of the pharmaceutical industry is to sell the most drugs and get the most people on them. That's where you get these blockbuster drugs.
So you take cocaine, heroin, and all of those illegal narcotics, combine them all together, and there are still more people that die from prescription pain medications than all of those. Well, why is that?
Addiction is a dependency where the individual doesn't assume responsibility for himself.
Pharmaceutical companies get patents on their drugs, and they get patents on the most expensive drugs. They want to hold on to these patents as long as they can.
Michael.
Mike. So how you doing, man?
Why is it that as Americans we have this culture of addiction? And I think it's really embedded in our lifestyle. We live such a rapid, fast-paced lifestyle that everything is based on proficiency, efficiency, and bottom line.
What we have is a situation where you have pharmaceutical companies that have a huge influence on the media.
You can't sit down to TV at night and not see a half a dozen drug company commercials.
Millions of Americans watch the ads and then ask their doctors for a prescription.
And then the final piece is the direct marketing to patients on television, which is illegal basically in every country except for here, where you have patients that can get commercials brought to them and they're very targeted. When you go into a doctor's office, you are going to get a pill.
The real story lies behind the television screens. Invisible to most consumers, the majority of pharmaceutical promotion is still directed at medical professionals. Increasingly, drug companies are pushing their brands at medical conferences and in medical journals. In addition, there are close to 100,000 industry sales representatives who spend countless hours visiting hospitals and physicians' offices.
Getting a prescription drug approval should not be an easy task, yet the drug manufacturers have influenced that procedure. It's called PDUFA. The Prescription Drug User Fee Act, a law passed by the United States Congress in 1992, which allowed the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, to collect fees from drug manufacturers to fund the new drug approval process. And it has been approved every 5 years up to now.
All of a sudden, in 1992, there was a little piece of legislation that was passed called the PDUFA Act, the Prescription Drug Users Fee Act of 1992. In essence, what that did was it opened up the floodgates for the pharmaceutical manufacturers to fund the FDA. Now think about this. In Texas, we would call that the fox mining the hen house. And what these manufacturers have to pay is up to $350,000 per new drug application. So we're not talking chump change here. We're talking an excessive amount of money that the pharmaceutical industry is allowed to put into the FDA.
And then there was a financial crisis, a gift of pharmaceutical companies. Aside from many desperate people who got financially wrecked due to the crisis, there were just a few options that they could take to relieve them from their misery: drugs, alcohol, and you guessed it, medication. And as you're about to find out, the U.S. government didn't do much to stop this epidemic, even though they were aware of the damage that it inflicted. We begin this section with Abby Euler, general manager of Salary.com, who spoke in 2012 when the U.S. economy and personal income was not doing that well.
Industries that have done really well are ones that need specialized folks. So we've seen growth in pharmaceuticals, we've seen growth in IT. It's not any surprise to see that there's been growth of 9 to 8% in some of those job families in those industries. So Pharmacists are seeing a 9% growth. Pharmacy staff is seeing a 9% growth. It's really supply and demand. If we don't have enough money to do construction, those jobs are going to be hard hit. But as we see, people still getting sick, people still needing drugs, we see pharmacy and, pharmacists growing, biostatisticians have had increases in their salaries.
Increasingly now, I think particularly since 2008 with the economic situation as it is, which is pretty dire here in the United States, that people are working longer hours, people are just struggling to make ends meet, and they're looking for some type of escapism. And it's much easier to get that through prescription medication than it is for illegal narcotics.
The look at the global spending on medicines helps us better understand the pattern of purchases from when the financial crisis hit. From 2007 to 2012, global spending skyrocketed from $731 billion to $965 billion in the course of 5 years, an increase of $234 billion. But then from 2012 to 2017, global purchases increased by $152 billion only, even though 3 of those years were speculated. The advertising behind these prescription drugs is astronomical. Common sense would say that these companies would focus the majority of their investment capital on R&D, research and development, but the opposite is true. As this table shows, drug companies spend far more on marketing the drugs, in some cases twice as much, than on developing them. Additionally, profit margins take into account R&D costs. Notice the direct correlation between advertising and revenues. The top 3 companies, Johnson & Johnson, Novartis, and Pfizer, spend almost double the amount in their marketing compared to the rest of their competitors.
Pharmaceutical companies are for-profit companies. They are not touchy, feel-good, nonprofit companies. They are trying to make money, they're trying to make a profit. So they are very, very good at marketing. So when you think about marketing in general, whether it's pharmaceutical drugs or soft drinks or fast food, everyone's trying to get the attention of the person either watching television, online, or in print media, etc.
With the medication aspect of it, it's much easier to get it from a doctor, and if a doctor does prescribe it to you, there's some sensibility that, well, this isn't, how can this be bad? My doctor's giving it to me. So they look at it, most Americans look at it as, well, I don't think maybe that I am addicted because my doctor prescribed this to me. And we have this connotation of a doctor giving us something that it must be okay. And that's a completely backward approach to looking at this.
It may be a backwards approach, but the general public, the consumer, is sold on it. Why are they so sold on it, though? The marketing companies have this figured out, and it is exactly what guest Sasha Knezev has said. If the instruction/prescription/advice comes from the doctor, then it must make it okay. Since most people trust their doctors, and nowhere is this vividly displayed than in the ads for different medications in the United States.
Middle of the night insomnia.
High blood sugar in adults and children with diabetes.
Fibromyalgia. Chronic widespread pain.
It's not for everyone.
Crestor is not for everyone.
Ask your dermatologist. Talk with your doctor.
Ask your doctor. Ask your doctor. Ask your doctor.
That's between you and your doctor.
Had to dedicate this segment to one of the most effective ads behind a prescription. This one goes out to all of you who second-guessed the power of pharmaceutical advertising and fell victim to it at the same time.
Like most Monday mornings, you don't feel good. You don't feel good about getting out of bed or getting motivated. A passing tiredness? Not necessarily. Get a medical. You might be suffering from MMDT, Monday morning dysphoric trouble. Monday morning dysphoric trouble is an incapacitating illness that French researchers have just discovered. Monday morning dysphoric trouble affects 1 adult out of 3. It can ruin your life, so fight back. Ask your doctor for advice. Anti-Flemix 20 milligrams. Stop Monday mornings being a nightmare. There, you see? It took less than 40 seconds to almost convince you you were sick, the victim of a new, recently discovered illness.
Patents to pharmaceuticals are generally awarded for 20 years, but 10 to 12 of those are usually spent developing the drugs at a cost of about $1.5 to $2.5 billion. This leaves only 8 to 10 years to make money before the formula can be taken up by generic drug companies, which sell the medicines for a fraction of the price. That's right, there is a shortage of innovation when it comes to new medicine. Dr. Kees de Joncheer at the World Health Organization has said, the system has served us well in developing new medicines, but in the past 10 to 20 years, there has been very little breakthrough in innovation. And with the biggest collection of patents expiring in the past 3 to 4 years, pharmaceutical companies are examining ways to keep their profits up. Of the 20 or 30 new drugs brought to the market each year, many scientists say typically 3 are genuinely new, with the rest offering only marginal benefits.
When you go to the doctor, you are more than likely going to get pharmaceuticals as a solution for your problem instead of the doctor taking the time to look for the root cause of the problem. And a lot of people want to blame the doctors, and again, I want to say that the doctors are really pawns in this system. With reduced reimbursements from insurance companies, doctors have to see more patients in the same amount of time to make the same amount of money that they made 10 or 15 years ago. So it's not cost effective for a doctor to sit there and speak to a patient for a long period of time. Doctors are actually punished for spending time with the patient. So it's much faster to give someone a pill for their problem because you can get to the next patient that much faster.
One entity not discussed here is the United States FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. They should be safeguarding Americans against what their name says, food and drugs.
The FDA is being infiltrated by many of these multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical corporations. It's actually a pharmacological complex, much like the military-industrial complex. But we look at it from an economic perspective. The pharmaceutical companies took over from the tobacco companies, and they are now the most powerful lobby. And I'm talking from a business standpoint, from a business sense. They are the most powerful lobby in the United States, hand down. They pretty much, took over and wiped out the tobacco company, and now they run the show. So when you look at an entity like the FDA, a state institution that's there for us as a public, we pay for it with our tax dollars. And the intent and the purpose of the FDA is to bring safety to food, medication, pretty much anything that we put in our mouth or we consume. Now, the problem is that these directors of the FDA that are supposedly serving our interest and trying to approve these medications that are making it into Main Street are almost all the time working for the pharmaceutical companies. It's sort of a backdoor strategy where they go work for the FDA, and as soon as they leave, they go work for a pharmaceutical company.
This is how far the U.S. government has come. They've acknowledged that there is a problem, just the same way that they have been fighting illegal drugs, a battle they have not won.
When confronting the problem of substance abuse, it makes sense to focus attention on the most dangerous types of drugs. And right now, fewer substances are more lethal than prescription opiates and heroin.
Eric Holder acknowledges that there is a problem. Notice the choice of words while he is reading from the teleprompter. He calls it substance abuse, putting the blame on the abuser, not the doctor prescribing it. He has put prescription opiates and heroin in the same category, while one is legally prescribed and the other is illegal completely.
Now, it's clear that opiate addiction is an urgent and growing public health crisis, and that's why Justice Department officials, including the DEA, and other key federal, state, and local leaders are fighting back very aggressively. Confronting this crisis will require a combination of enforcement as well as treatment. The Justice Department is committed to both.
But the problem with prescription drug abuse lies first with the pharmaceutical companies, then with the doctors. That's who the DEA and law enforcement should target. But like the fight against illegal drugs, the U.S. government has failed, or they have chosen to maintain the problem.
What people need to really be aware of is that this is not an altruistic business. We're not talking about, CEOs that go to their companies every day that are philanthropists that are trying to heal the world. That's a very unrealistic picture of people to have of what a pharmaceutical industry is about or what they do. This industry is beholden to stockholders. They have a legal obligation to consider the stockholders above and beyond the consumer. So if you are aware of that, that makes it a lot more comprehensible as to why they would put drugs on the market that could harm people but were financially beneficial to their stockholders. And that's the point I want to drive home to people.
Children being targeted by pharmaceuticals, generic drug companies with the help of big pharma, targeting doctors in third world countries. Just some of the abuses not covered in this edition of the program, along with its economic impact, since time did not allow it. But please send us your comments and suggestions to the links below. I'm Kobe Tarwai, and I'll see you next week.